Hello, everyone. My name is Ian Rowe,
And I'm Nique,
and welcome to The Invisible Men, where we make the achievements of incredible men invisible no more. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of The Invisible Men, where we demystify Black excellence. My name is Ian Rowe, and I'm a resident fellow of the American Enterprise Institute.
Hello, I'm Nique, a member of the Leadership Network at AEI. And today we have an exceptional guest, a gentleman who has done amazing things in the sports arena, in the business arena, and in life. There's been a lot of discussion recently about who's the greatest athlete. And we have a gentleman with us today from 1974, call it, to 1984. Collected 3 world championships, 7 World Cups, won 3 NC2A national championships, probably lost, Lee, maybe 10 times over that 10-year period. So you're talking about hundreds of victories in a sport where there's no net, no basket, no helmet, no racket. It's you and another man trying to dominate one another. And today I have the great pleasure of welcoming Lee Kemp to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Boy, I really feel pretty special after hearing that. Thank you, Nique. I appreciate it. And very, very honored to be on the podcast. Absolutely.
Well, Lee, it's great to have you. Welcome to the Invisible Men. Our whole idea is to introduce our audience to exceptional people that they may have not had the chance to know, but really want to learn from your story. And, we like to just start off with just asking, where were you, who were you before you won all those victories? What's your origin story? And was there anything significant that occurred in your life that put you on this path where you recognize that greatness was actually accessible to you too?
Well, that's a great question, in-depth question. I have to pause for a few seconds to think about it because my story is not uncommon, I would say, because I was adopted. There's a lot of young boys, girls today that are adopted, given up by their parents at birth, as I was. Not common, but it happened. But that's my origins. I was given up at birth. My biological mother, her name was Barbara. I had a chance to meet her in my 30s. But at the time she had me, she was, I think, 19, and she already had a 2-year-old, 2 different men. She was going down a path that would have been very tough for me had I been raised by her. So it was just a blessing that I was given up for adoption at birth. But I was 5 though when I was adopted, so I was institutionalized for a while. So not many people, parents who want children, will go and adopt a child that's already 5 or 6 or so, something like that. I was ready to turn 6. Normally they want an infant that they can raise and go through that. So I didn't have that. And being a parent myself, I know that those first 5 years are pretty critical. So, I'm not a psychologist or a child psychologist, so I can't delve into that. But I know there had to have been some unique things during that period of my life that helped shape me for who I am today. And but again, as I said, I was fortunate enough to be adopted into a Black family, an older couple. They didn't have any kids, so I grew up as an only child. So that's another unique marker that helped move me down the path that I ended up getting on, because here I find this individual sport called wrestling, which is totally individual. And it suited my personality. I spent a lot of time alone. I was focused a lot, and a new revelation that has come to my mind because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Incident, I've been interviewed a lot lately about my life, wrestling life, and all that stuff. So I've been thinking about it a lot, and what came into my mind recently was the fact that when you have kids, you know what it's like when an infant starts crying. They learn very quickly how to get attention, whether they're hungry or whatever. You hear this baby screaming, you go stop and you figure out what it wants. But I believe, I have no proof of this, but being institutionalized in a home with other kids screaming, whatever, without an individual mother and father caring for you all those first 5 years, that I think, in my mind, I think I learned very early on that no one's coming to save you. That's just how deep I've been thinking about this now, because I have kids now that I've raised, and we get into conversations. My children all know my biological mother, and I've biological siblings that I know, that I've had a chance to meet. But I think all that rolled into this crazy individual tough sport of wrestling, where absolutely no one comes and saves you. You have to make it on your own. So from birth, I was in this mode of survival, I guess you would say. And I don't have any knowledge that I was ever abused or anything like that, so I can't go down that road. But uh, uh, I do know that there's some unique things about my personality that allowed me to do what I did in wrestling. And then even academically, I've excelled in arenas where I didn't think I was any good in, which I'm sure we'll bring up even in this podcast, because being a Black person in America, it's easy to feel like you can't accomplish academic things, or you're made to feel sometimes that you're not smart and those type of things. So, I went through all that. And, anyway, that's kind of the beginnings of my life. And I'll add to it that I was raised by a wonderful family that I always will call my parents, because they are Black couple, older Black couple. They're in their 50s, from the South. So they brought with them all those hardworking ideals, came to the North for a better life. All that stuff was embodied in me when they adopted me in Cleveland. So I'm a child of the 60s, basically. I was born in 1956. So, we were living in Cleveland, not the inner city, but, right on the outskirts of Cleveland during all that racial unrest that occurred during in the late 60s, with Martin Luther King being assassinated, 1968. I was 12 years old. I was old enough to know what was going on then. My parents moved from Cleveland to Chardon because of that. Most major cities in the United States were they were rioting, they were under siege, basically. Cleveland was no different. My parents wanted to get out of that and moved our family to Chardon, Ohio, which was a farming community 30 miles northeast of Cleveland, probably less than 1/10 of 1% white, or even Black.
Whole other worlds.
No, it was just an absolutely whole other world. But that's where I found wrestling, and that's where I learned about hard work. My dad coming from the South, and he was from that old school where you couldn't talk back. If you looked at him wrong, you would get probably punished. So it was 100% total respect for authority and your parents. And my dad was a hard worker, so we had a farm. He had a regular job in the city of Cleveland. He'd drive back there, but he was living his dream, having this farm. And I got to watch that. I got to watch two things. I got to watch him first leave Cleveland and go to Chardon when everyone told him it was a bad idea. Our relatives, the Black community. I grew up in an all-Black environment, all-Black neighborhood, Black teachers in elementary school, the whole thing. But they were saying, why do you want to move to Chardon? Why do you want to move around with all those white folks? Why, bad decision. Don't do it. It's dumb. Everything you could possibly. And I would hear this, but my father looked way past that, and my mom. They wanted a farm.
At what age was it? What age?
I was it was 1968.
Oh, so you were already 12. Okay.
Yeah, I was 12. We moved right after the riots and stuff. I think it was just a time that my parents just said, we've had enough. It was dangerous. It was really dangerous. And I think my dad just wanted a farm. And the last time, I checked, I guess there are no farms in inner city Cleveland. So
And there still aren't.
There still aren't. So I don't think it was just a white thing. I'm sure it wasn't that. He just wanted a better life, and it really translated into that. And I saw him just transform this 25 acres of land into this beautiful farm. We had animals, we had cows, pigs, and chickens, and all that, while he had a regular factory job that he went to. And so I saw a man gain something that he wanted against what I would consider, odds. It certainly wasn't unpopular. decision. There was one or two black families in the whole town. I was one of three black kids in the whole high school. So, needless to say, it was a little bit intimidating growing up there and being in school there. But anyway, that created the foundation for me.
Wow, that's really powerful. I mean, the metaphor that you say, that this idea that no one was coming to save you, I wonder how much that has applied not just to wrestling, but to every aspect of your life.
I think it has to. My son mentioned something to me recently. We were going through, and I feel even bad saying this. It seems weird because I'm well educated. I had great jobs and all this kind of stuff, but I fell into some really hard times, and I even to this day I can't understand how I got to the place I got to. And it wasn't because of drugs or anything like that, but I just was in a tough spot. And I owned a car dealership in 2008, and that was when the economy was crashing. Car dealerships were being bailed out by then President Obama, all that stuff. So I owned a car dealership then, and I went through a divorce and lost everything. Got to a point where, lost my children, and it was really a struggle. It was tough. And so anyway, I got my two younger kids back, and oh wow. After that, I'm trying to think of the year, but anyway, finally got them back. Struggled, as a single dad with two kids. I had a 10-year-old. I guess it was the year. Oh my gosh, I can't even think now. What 2010? I guess 2010 was when I got my kids back. So I was struggling with trying to figure out how to be a single dad, trying to have a job, all that kind of stuff. So my hat goes off to people that do that, men and women who have to raise the responsibility of raising kids by themselves when you have small kids. So that was difficult for me. So my kids watched me firsthand struggle. And I think as adults, I've seen and witnessed parents, adults, people like myself, my peers, we want to make things easier for our kids. So we take hardships away from our kids so that they don't have to struggle. And it's almost like it's a sign of success when we can pass things on to our kids, wealth or businesses or things like that. So we just blindly do it. And sometimes I think we cripple our kids, in a way. But my kids got to see me struggling because I was struggling, they were struggling. So they learned to appreciate things like, little things like when my son wanted a PlayStation, he understood there was no PlayStation coming because we didn't have it. There was it wasn't like we're living in this nice big house and I'm saying to my child, I have my Mercedes out in the driveway and I'm telling him he can't have a PlayStation.
Right.
We're living in a raw, really small little house I rented with nothing. I'm driving an old car, struggling, but I mean, it's still me, I'm still who I am. I still had the wrestling pedigree. I would go into, in fact, I was getting inducted to one of the halls of fame. One of the questions is what was one of the things I'm most honored for, and it's being inducted to the International Wrestling Hall of Fame. I fly to China to get inducted into the International Wrestling Hall of Fame and get honored as one of the greatest wrestlers, in the world. I come back home to just to a very simple life because I was struggling. But my kids saw that, they witnessed that. And even to this day, my son just mentioned something to me just yesterday that he appreciates me, he understands the struggle. He saw me be real creative and trying to find ways to make money. I remember once and I won't tell that story, but anyway, it was just kind of cool to watch him, my son, and he was younger. When he was 10 when he came to live with me, and my daughter was 16. My older son didn't; he stayed in California. But the two of them have spoken to me on several occasions about the fact that they appreciated how I don't know, I didn't quit. I just kept moving ahead. Didn't adopt any bad habits. Kids are watching those kind of things. I didn't drink. I didn't do anything, any bad habits. They just saw me going to work. And that old saying that no matter what kind of job you have, although I wasn't a janitor, but the saying, whether you're a janitor or whatever, it's an honest job. You go to work every day and you're supporting your family. I felt like that, even though I wasn't a janitor, but I certainly wasn't owning a multi-million-dollar business anymore. I certainly wasn't using my MBA and down New York City working for one of the major consumer packaged goods companies like I was in the past. I wasn't working for one of the major advertising agencies like I had in the past. I was now at a point in my life, in my 50s, where I was basically starting over with, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old daughter, trying to figure out how I could make ends meet for them, let alone how to get them through college. And by the way, they're all done with college. Or my youngest son has earned a scholarship in wrestling. I moved him in the path that I took, and that was the wrestling path, and it earned him a full scholarship to Cal Poly, which I thank him almost every day for that, because it changed my life too, because I got to move to California with him. And I embrace every day I walk outside and don't have to deal with shoveling snow, which people that I know right now living in the Midwest and Chicago and places, even Texas, whatever, they're shoveling snow right now. But by any means, the journey's not over. It's one thing that I have learned through 64 years of living is, and I heard T.D. Jakes say this in an interview he did with the former Prime Minister of Liberia, a woman named Ellen Sirleaf. She's still living. She's probably 70 now, but she was the first woman, first of all, and she was a Black woman at that, head of state of an African nation, Liberia, an amazing woman. And Pastor T.D. Jakes did a podcast with her. It was an amazing podcast to hear those two discussing a variety of issues. But one thing T.D. Jakes said in that interview, from her life, listening to her speak, of the accomplishments of becoming the first female Black woman and then female prime minister of an African nation. After they went back and forth about that, he asked her about how it felt, and after striving so long to achieve this amazing feat. Of course, she mentioned Mandela as being, of course, the ultimate champion of Black Africans, how he kind of paved the way. But after hearing her talk about him, and after hearing her talk about her struggles, T.D. Jakes said, the thing I'm hearing from this is the reward that you get for winning a battle. And clearly, she, as many people, they fight battles, they have success. She had this ultimate success of becoming the prime minister of the head of state of Liberia. And then after she went on to talk about her other struggles, he said, you know what? The reward for winning one battle is another battle. And after hearing that, it just was like a revelation that went off in my mind. And I said, he's exactly right. That's what the reward is for any amount of struggle that you go through. When you finally come out the other end, you know what your reward is for that? Another one. You're going to get another one. And your life's going to continue that way until you're no longer of this world anymore. There's never a time that you are not in a state of struggle unless you quit life, because just waking up in the morning, there's struggle sometimes. It's something around the corner you don't see yet. It could be an accident that could be waiting. It could be, a bad call from a doctor from your last physical. It could be anything. It could be anything. And as I've learned through the 64 years of living, the reward for winning a battle is just another battle. So thank God for the opportunity to have a battle. And also a legend in tennis, Billie Jean King, once said, pressure is a privilege of champions. So if you don't have pressure on you, it means you're not in the game anymore, really. There's nothing at stake. So I'd rather be in the game under tremendous pressure because I've got a lot at stake to win.
Lee, that was wonderful. I want to go back for just a minute because I think our audience will learn a lot from this. So take us back to the 1980 Olympics. You were of all the potential Olympic athletes, you were probably at the top of the list for someone that was likely to get a gold medal. You know, you had spent at that point, what, 10 years in preparation for, or 8 years in preparation for this moment. Of course, President Carter decided to mix politics and sports, which was maybe one of the dumbest decisions of the last 50 years. But what did it mean to make that Olympic team? What did it mean to have that opportunity taken from you? And how over the years have you dealt with that disappointment?
That's a great question. It's the way that I can characterize it is like a death of someone close to you. You know, that person's gone. You know you have to move on. You can't just dwell with that death. Could be, and I'm sure you do too. I'm sure our audience knows people that have died, parents that have had children die, parents that have had spouses die, close friends, best friends, whatever. I mean, we all go through something. So you have to go on, which you do, and but that never leaves you. It's always something that, and you don't have to. You're not walking around sad every day, of course, but you never forget about it. It never is outside of your mind. And with a sport like wrestling or any sport that's competed in the Olympic Games, that comes around every 4 years. So every 4 years, you have to think about it again, whether you want to or not, because now it's there. And of course, I am excited for our young athletes to have a chance to be Olympic champions, or at least just to be in the games. It's a wonderful experience for anyone to have that opportunity. So I'm just absolutely happy and excited for people that have that opportunity. To have it taken away for that reason, for just an arbitrary decision, makes it almost impossible to reconcile in your mind as something that was fair. It's still difficult, 40 years, I guess it's been. I don't know, is that the math right? I guess.
Yeah, 41 years.
Yeah, it's still hard because, a large part of life is having confidence. And when you achieve something, by and large, it comes from having a realization of self-realization, a realization of your abilities, your talent. You actually believe you can do this. Sure, it's going to be hard, but you know that it's possible. It's something that you can kind of get this thing done. I was so confident that I could be an Olympic champion. There was just no doubt in my mind that I was not gonna win an Olympic gold medal. Whether it was going to change my life or not, who knows? Now in 2021, yes, it could change your life, even in a sport like wrestling. Our athletes, even in wrestling, if you win an Olympic gold medal, you get $250,000. That's not life changing completely. It's not like millions, but it's something. In my era, there was zero, and even before my era, there was nothing. You were spending money just to be able to be in your sport to compete. So in 1980, it wasn't really going to change my life from a financial point of view, but it was who I thought I was at the time, and it has created a whole. I'll tell you this quick story, not a really story, but just something really quick. I was at a wrestling function, and a lot of our wrestling Olympic champions and world champions were there, and invariably there's photos that want to be taken. And so one of our Olympic champions just kind of mentioned to the photographer, "Hey, let's get a picture of us Olympic champions." And I heard it, but I was kind of standing in this group, and they all started to move for the picture. And a few people said, "Come on, Lee, come on up." And I go, "Okay." And then somebody said again, "Well, it's just the Olympic champions for this one," And I thought, wow, that's, they're not talking about me. So I just kind of stepped back and I watched the photograph. And then I think when I stepped back, a few caring individuals realized what was going on and said, "No, Lee, come on back." I said, no, that's okay. That's okay. I'm good. And so I just reminded me that that's life. That's the reality of life. I'm not an Olympic champion. I could say that I probably would have been. You know, people that know wrestling could say that, but it didn't.
Wow, it's such a powerful story. And for our audience, I will tell them that Lee eventually became a coach on the Olympic wrestling team. What year was that, Lee?
2008.
2008. Oh, okay, very good. Well, so we have a segment, Lee, that we call the speed round, where we throw out individuals or philosophies and ask you to pick one and tell us why you prefer that. So we always start with this one, which is Malcolm or Martin?
I pick Malcolm, and the reason why. Do I have to give a reason why or just the answer?
No, please. The reason why is critical.
Well, Malcolm understood at that point in time the depths of evil that, and I'm not talking about all white people because, you know, we all have friends that are white, basically. When I use the term white people, I'm just using collectively as the people in power that were making the decisions to oppress our people. There were a lot of white people who fought on the side of black people. So when I say white people, it's the ones that were trying to oppress us. But Malcolm understood the depth of the evil that of the oppressor at that time, and he knew that it would take violence if necessary to break ourselves free from the bondages of our oppressor. And that's the only way you get free from someone oppressing you is through violence, basically, you know, through violence and struggle. He also believed in education as well. And I think Martin believed in education and nonviolence, but I think toward the end of his life, I think he realized that, not that he was going to espouse violence, but I think he realized that he was, I don't know, I just feels like from his writings, it seems like he was understanding that the nature of evil that he was up against, we were still a long ways away from peacefully gaining it. And I think a combination of the two, I mean, we're still in it, you know, it's been 400 years and we're still going through, you know, some of the same things that we were going through in the 50s and 60s and 40s and 20s and even further than that. So strength is never demonstrated through the appearance of weakness. I think some people took Martin Luther King as weak because he wasn't aggressive. He was aggressive in his peaceful agenda, but no one was afraid of him. They were afraid of what he was accomplishing in his, gaining support of masses amount of black people to move in one direction, and that's very positive. But they weren't afraid for, I think there's got to be a certain amount of fear, maybe sometimes, to make someone release their grip on you. Because if you're just relying on the goodness of their own heart to give you something, as you can see, 400 years and still waiting. I mean, the things that we've gotten have come through force, and not necessarily violence against white people, but just forceful movement to where maybe there's enough of an intimidation that white people just won't mess with you, and you go ahead with what you're going to accomplish.
Well, let me give you two more that follows down that path. Muhammad Ali or Jack Johnson?
Oh, Jack Johnson for sure. When you look at that man's life, the years he lived, I kind of looked it up even. I was trying to say, good gosh, he was winning his, what years did he?
Well, World Championship, he won it in 1908 in Australia versus Tommy Burns.
Yes, that's the date I was looking for. In 1908, I mean, when you frame that with the 1955 lynching of Emmett Till for just looking at a white woman, here he had married white women. He was traveling to Europe, all over Europe. He was beating up white people, white men in the ring. I think there was a combination of fear and ultimately respect for him, because obviously he could have been killed at any moment, and people would have done nothing to the perpetrators, because people are being killed now in 2020 and nothing's being done to the perpetrators. So back then, the fact that he did what he did, he lived exactly the way he wanted to live, traveled exactly where he wanted to travel, dated whoever he wanted to date, and dared anybody to tell him that he could, and he held the world title for, I don't know, 10 years, maybe?
7, 8 years, yeah. I mean, he lost it under questionable circumstances in Cuba, in like the 34th round against a guy who was actually a bum, who Jack Dempsey literally broke in half just a year later. So a lot of people think he threw that fight to get back to the U.S. because when he lost the fight, the claim is that they double crossed him and he came back to the U.S. and they put him in jail for trumped up charges, but. Yeah, he was a special man, no question about it. Yeah, I'll tell one quick story that it may be a little bit part of the history, but I think it's probably true. He was in Chicago, and he used to love fast cars. He actually always owned very fast, elegant cars, and he was doing over the speed limit, and a police officer stopped him. And he said, Mr. Johnson, because he was world famous, you're driving over the speed limit. That's going to be a $50 fine. And Jack Johnson gave the police officer $100. And the officer said, no, sir, it's 50. He said, well, I'm going to be coming back the same way, so take the other 50 now. Yeah, amazing, man. Last one, Lee, on the speed round. And you kind of sat in both camps. Entrepreneurship or corporate leadership?
Entrepreneurship, definitely, because you have control of your own destiny there. Corporate success is great, but corporate success is always controlled by, a white board of people, basically. You may have a great position, you could even be president, but your position could be taken away, could be reversed. And there seems to never be a lot of control in that situation. Great accomplishment, for sure. But if there's an opportunity to own your own enterprise and to build that definitely is, I feel, the way to go. The way that's going to enrich Black people's lives as a group and builds generational wealth easier. So definitely entrepreneurship.
Lee, thanks you for sharing these stories. It's incredible. I can't but help, though, to listening to your life story. You have often been at the intersection of sports and politics and sports and social justice. I mean, the president of the United States killed your ability to win a gold medal. And so I have to ask you to reflect on the contemporary world in which sports is playing such a prominent role in politics and social justice. I mean, you can't watch an NBA game without seeing Black Lives Matter painted onto the basketball courts, or watching the NFL saying, take all of us to end racism. So I'm curious your thoughts, not on whether or not athletes should be using their platform or using their voice. I mean, they're American citizens and they're freedom of speech, which is a beautiful thing. But why do you think it is that so much power is afforded to athletes when they speak out on these issues? And should they be the spokespersons on things like, police killings or social justice issues broadly?
That's a great question, because a lot of athletes probably, aren't in a position to have maybe the in-depth of knowledge on certain issues, but then they can just talk about something based on just their limited knowledge. And so because they have such a big platform, they can affect and influence large amounts of people. So that on the one hand is concerning. But then you've got the actual media itself that they're in place to give information to the public. Supposedly good, honest, accurate, unbiased information. And that clearly doesn't happen all the time. So, we live in a situation where, every American citizen really has an opportunity because of social media to build a platform. I mean, there's people, athletes or not, but let's just say athletes in this case, they've got millions of followers. Even non-athletes have millions of followers. Entertainers have millions of followers. They can espouse a point of view and really affect and get to millions of people, just like the news media can. I think the news media is very biased at times, most times, actually. So we're living in a very difficult time right now because it's definitely a cancel culture for sure. And I think we're all in a position to pick and choose who we want to listen to. And I think I think an athlete has a right to say, as a human being, as an American citizen, we live in a country where we should have freedom of speech. And I know there's something in the news right now, like we've censored, people now because of the messages that they've been saying have been bad. They've created conspiracy theories and even riots. So people on both sides are saying, we are suppressing freedom of speech, even though it may not be the speech you want. That's wrong because this is America. So it's, I don't want to see violence. I don't want to see lies, conspiracy theories either. Should we suppress that? That's a tough one. At the same time, there's athletes being censored, or at least being reprimanded, or LeBron James being told to go shut up and dribble because he makes a comment publicly. You rewind back to the '68 Olympics where the black athletes who were track athletes, their whole lives were altered because they made a public statement on the award stand at the Olympic Games. Tommy Evans and Carlos.
John Carlos, yep.
John Carlos. I mean, if you read the biography of their lives were forever changed because of that one act that they did. And the South African man who was on the award stand with him, he was white. His life was ruined because of that. I mean, he ended up dying. He died relatively young and was ostracized ever since that moment. So, I think it will always occur. Whether I think it should happen or not, but that's a tough one because my first answer would be yes, because you've got all this, misinformation coming from the actual media itself.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I find interesting about sports athletes is that, as you say, they may not be as knowledgeable or as educated, but they're often from the communities in which they are expressing, the challenges that are being faced. So there is a level of authenticity often that I think, even with the platforms and power that they have, they're not their lives for which they came from are often very close to the issues that they're talking about. So I think it's an interesting issue. Well, Lee, in wrapping up, one of our traditions when Nique and I started this Invisible Men video many years ago, we wanted young kids across the country to understand that there are lots of examples of Black excellence that they may not be seeing. And we actually, in fact, created an imaginary young man, Daryl, a 16-year-old Black kid who lives in forgotten USA, who, there are a lot of Daryls in the world of all races who may be confused right now about what chances they have in their life, given all these barriers, given all these challenges. And I'm curious, as someone who, your life story is extraordinary, what would you tell a Daryl? What would you say to him in terms of how he has to make his way, knowing that there may not be anyone coming to his rescue either?
That's a great question. I think because I'm 64 years old and I was raised by parents who were from the South, who, I remember my father, if he was alive today, he'd be close to 100 years old, I guess, or maybe in his 90s, I guess. But I remember him telling stories of his great great grandfather who was a slave. I mean, just think about that for a second. That's kind of like, that's like mind boggling to think about that. So people of my generation, especially my parents' generation, let's just say. So I'm 64. So people of that generation, my dad was born in like 1911 or so, somewhere in there, 1911, 1912. Someone of that generation, they were willing to sacrifice a lot for their children, meaning work any kind of a job they could, didn't matter if they liked the job or not. And they instilled on their children, me, an education. I mean, I had to go to college. There would have been no way that I could not have gone to college. I was always talked about my parents would have worked 3 jobs each to put me through college. So there was huge amounts of sacrifice there. They went without a lot of things, did not buy new cars, the whole bit, all that because they wanted their son to go to college. And I was fortunate enough to earn a scholarship, so that eased all that. But without the scholarship, I still would have gone to college. What I see this Daryl, this young boy named Daryl, a young person today, my son's one of the Daryls. He's 20 years old. Young people today are not of the mindset to sacrifice as much as maybe my parents' generation did. I grew up in an era and a generation. My parents just taught us how to talk to police, taught us how to stay out of trouble. They knew it was wrong. They knew, but it was how we had to live our lives. And they were making sacrifices. They were teaching us how to make those same sacrifices so that we could move the generations of the Kemp family ahead. That long-range thinking, I don't see as much anymore. The average young person, like my son's age, they didn't live through the civil rights movement and all. They don't know what that's like. They can read about it, maybe. It's not even taught in schools that much. All they know is what they know now. And what they know now is that they think they can make $1 million just by an idea, which they could. They could, but I don't know if they're willing to sacrifice the long plan B. Plan A is to go out and hit it and make it, start a company and do all this stuff. That's great. But there's no plan B there. Like, okay, what are you going to do to make sure that you at least have a great life and you instill that same trajectory to your children?
Yeah. Wow. Well, Lee, thank you for that. Very profound. And thank you for being our guest on this episode of The Invisible Men. You're just such an exemplar example of Black excellence throughout your life. I wish that 1980 experience had come through, but you're still a gold medal winning father, individual, and leader. So thank you very much. To our audience, thank you for watching another episode of The Invisible Men. If you want to see all other episodes, you can go to www.invisible.men. And we, as always, are very committed to bringing you examples of Black excellence. So thank you, Nique, as always.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And Lee, if folks want to find you, I know there was a film released about your life, I think last year. I think you got a new book that came out within the last year or so. How do they find you, and what are some of your priority projects nowadays?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on The Invisible Man. It's been a truly a pleasure. And in terms of some initiatives that I'm doing now, the documentary, you'll learn more about Lee Kemp than he actually knows about himself. Sometimes I see things in there that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. That's in there. But anyway, it's called Wrestled Away, the Lee Kemp story. I also have a book called Winning Gold. It's a book of inspirational messages. A short book, you can open it up to any page and hopefully be inspired. And I have some initiatives in wrestling. I have a 16 video series called Your Greatest Season. And all of these things you can find on my website at leekemp.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for your time, Lee. A real pleasure.
Lee,
you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for watching another episode of The Invisible Men. You can find other episodes at the AEI podcast channel on YouTube or the website invisible.men or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.